On January 15th, 2025, the United States Department of Defense signed a contract that didn't make the front page of any newspaper. No press conference, no official announcement, just a quiet filing in a federal database that most people will never see. The contract was with OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, and it authorized artificial intelligence to begin processing classified military intelligence in real time, not as a tool, not as a suggestion engine, as an active participant in threat assessment and response recommendations. 72 hours later, 3 separate military commands across 2 continents had already implemented AI-assisted decision protocols. What took human analysts 4 hours to process now takes 11 seconds. And nobody outside a handful of generals and tech executives seems to understand what just happened to the future of human civilization. Right now, at this exact moment, there are AI systems analyzing satellite imagery over conflict zones faster than any human team ever could. They're identifying weapons shipments, predicting insurgent movements, and calculating strike probabilities, with accuracy rates that would have seemed like science fiction 18 months ago. But here's what should genuinely terrify you, or at the very least, make you pay attention for the next 15 minutes. For the first time in human history, the decision loop, that's the time between identifying a threat and responding to it, has been compressed to a speed where human judgment is becoming optional rather than essential. Let me put that in perspective. During the Cold War, when both superpowers had their fingers hovering over nuclear buttons, the decision timeline from threat detection to response was measured in minutes. 30 minutes was considered fast. That window gave human beings time to verify, to double-check, to ask questions, to call off a strike if new information emerged. It gave us room for human hesitation, which, despite what action movies tell you, is actually a feature of our biology that has prevented countless catastrophic mistakes. In 1983, a Soviet early warning system detected what appeared to be 5 American nuclear missiles headed for Moscow. The protocol was clear: retaliate immediately. But Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov, a human being with doubts and instincts and the capacity for uncertainty, decided the reading was probably a malfunction. He was right. It was a computer error caused by sunlight reflecting off clouds. His hesitation, his very human slowness to act, likely prevented nuclear war. Now compress that decision window from 30 minutes to 30 seconds. Remove the Petrovs from the equation. Replace human hesitation with algorithmic certainty. That's not a hypothetical future. That's January 2025. Multiple defense contractors, including Palantir, Anduril, and now OpenAI, have active contracts to integrate AI into what the military calls the kill chain, the sequence of events from target identification to engagement. And the selling point, the reason billions of dollars are flooding into this technology, is speed. When your adversary can process threats and respond in seconds, you cannot afford to take minutes. The country that blinks first loses. Except now, neither country is blinking at all. If this is the kind of story that matters to you, the kind of thing that's happening right now while most people are scrolling past celebrity gossip and arguing about movies, do me a favor and subscribe. Because this channel is built for people who want to understand the shifts happening beneath the surface, the ones that actually change how the world works. No hype, no clickbait that doesn't deliver, just the uncomfortable truths that most creators won't touch because they're too complex or too unsettling. All right, let's keep going because it gets so much darker. So what does it actually mean that ChatGPT, or more accurately, the underlying architecture that powers ChatGPT, is now embedded in military operations? To understand that, you need to understand what modern AI can do that humans cannot. And I'm not talking about playing chess or generating images. I'm talking about pattern recognition at a scale that breaks human cognition. Imagine you're a military intelligence analyst. Your job is to identify potential threats by analyzing communications, intercepts, satellite photos, financial transactions, social media posts, supply chain movements, and signals intelligence from dozens of sources. On a good day, working with a full team, you might be able to fully process and cross-reference 50 high-priority items, maybe 100, if you're exceptional and you skip lunch. An AI system can process 50,000 items in the same time frame, identify correlations across completely unconnected data streams, and flag threats that no human would ever notice, because the pattern exists across too many variables for our brains to hold simultaneously. In October 2024, an AI system used by the Israeli Defense Forces reportedly identified a Hamas tunnel network by correlating water usage patterns, concrete deliveries logged 3 years earlier, and electromagnetic signatures that human analysts had dismissed as background noise. The system found a connection that required holding 17 different data points in simultaneous comparison. No human analyst would have ever made that leap because our working memory doesn't function that way. The tunnels were real. The strike was authorized. And the decision from data input to mission execution took less than 6 hours, a process that previously would have taken weeks or never happened at all. Now, you might be thinking, That's good, right? Better intelligence means fewer mistakes, more precision, less collateral damage. And that would be a reasonable conclusion if we lived in a world where only one side had this capability, where the technology stayed contained, and where AI systems never made errors. We live in none of those worlds. Here's where the situation shifts from concerning to genuinely destabilizing. China isn't sitting this out. Neither is Russia. Neither is anyone with the resources to build or buy military AI. In November 2024, leaked documents from the Chinese Academy of Military Science revealed that the People's Liberation Army has been testing autonomous drone swarms capable of collaborative target selection without human input since early 2023. These aren't theoretical prototypes. They're operational systems deployed in the South China Sea, running live exercises, refining their algorithms with every mission. Russia, despite its economic constraints, has poured resources into AI-assisted electronic warfare systems that can identify and jam enemy communications faster than human operators can react. And they're not developing these systems to put them on a shelf. They're integrating them into active military doctrine because they've run the same calculations everyone else has. In a conflict between two modern militaries, the side with slower decision-making dies first. This creates what game theorists call a commitment race. When both sides know that speed is survival, both sides are incentivized to delegate more authority to automated systems, to remove human delays from the loop, to trust the algorithm even when human instinct says, wait. And once that process starts, it feeds on itself. If you suspect your adversary has removed the human from certain decisions, you have to remove the human from your equivalent decisions, or you're operating with a permanent structural disadvantage. The equilibrium point of this race isn't both sides using AI cautiously under heavy human oversight. The equilibrium is both sides giving AI as much autonomy as technically possible, because anything less means you lose. But here's the nightmare scenario that keeps strategists awake at night. AI systems, even the most advanced ones we have today, are not infallible. They're trained on data, and they optimize for patterns they've seen before. But war, especially modern war, is full of edge cases, weird scenarios, unprecedented events that don't match historical patterns. An AI trained to identify incoming missiles might misinterpret a satellite launch. An AI optimizing for threat elimination might not understand the political consequences of striking a target near a school or a hospital. An AI analyzing enemy communications might miss sarcasm, cultural context, or deliberate misinformation designed to trigger exactly the automated response the enemy wants. In September 2024, a story broke that barely got any attention outside defense circles. A U.S. Navy AI system monitoring Chinese naval movements in the Taiwan Strait flagged a Chinese destroyer's radar pattern as indicative of an imminent missile launch. The system recommended activating defensive countermeasures, which in that context meant preparing to engage. Human operators overruled the recommendation because they had context the AI didn't. The Chinese ship was conducting a routine drill it had done dozens of times before, but this was the first time during a storm, and the weather pattern created radar signatures the AI had been trained to associate with pre-launch sequences. The AI was following its programming perfectly. It was also completely wrong. And if that decision loop had been fully automated, if humans had been removed to shave off precious seconds, we might be talking about how a thunderstorm started a war. Now let's zoom out and look at what this means for global power structures. Because this isn't just about military technology. This is about who controls the future, which countries become superpowers, and which ones become dependencies. For the last 75 years, military dominance has been determined by industrial capacity, nuclear arsenals, and force projection, the ability to deploy overwhelming power anywhere on the planet. The United States has been unmatched in all three categories, and that dominance has shaped everything from trade agreements to currency markets to which governments survive and which ones collapse. But AI changes the equation. It's not about how many aircraft carriers you have, it's about how fast you can process information and make decisions. And that advantage doesn't require decades of shipbuilding or trillions in military spending. It requires data, computing power, and algorithmic sophistication. China has all three. They have more data on their population than any government in human history. They have domestic chip manufacturing that's rapidly closing the gap with Western technology. And they have a political system that doesn't require public debate or ethical review boards before deploying new capabilities. In fact, some analysts argue that China's authoritarian structure gives them an advantage in the AI arms race precisely because they don't have to navigate the messy democratic process of public accountability. When the U.S. military wants to deploy a new AI system, there are congressional hearings, oversight committees, think pieces in major newspapers, debates about ethics and transparency. When China wants to deploy a new AI system, they deploy it. The political friction is asymmetric, and in a race measured in months, friction matters. This has implications that go far beyond who wins the next war. Financial markets are already pricing in the shift. Defense stocks with heavy AI integration have massively outperformed the broader market over the last 18 months. Palantir's stock price has more than tripled. Anduril, which is still private, is reportedly valued at over $14 billion despite having relatively little revenue compared to traditional defense contractors. Investors understand that the companies building military AI are building the infrastructure of future geopolitical power. And then there's the dollar. The US dollar has been the world's reserve currency for 80 years, not because of American economic virtue, but because of American military dominance. Countries hold dollars because they trust that American power will remain stable and unchallengeable. But if that military dominance becomes uncertain, if China demonstrates that it can compete on equal or superior terms in AI-driven conflict, the calculus changes. We could be looking at the beginning of a genuine shift in reserve currency status, which would have economic consequences that make any recession we've experienced in modern times look trivial by comparison. But let's bring this back to something even more immediate, because this isn't just about tanks and missiles. The AI being developed for military use doesn't stay in military use. It never has. The internet was a military project. GPS was a military project. Encryption standards, satellite technology, autonomous vehicles, all of these started as defense applications and then diffused into civilian life. Military AI will do the same thing, except the civilian implications of this technology are considerably more concerning than getting better directions on your phone. Facial recognition systems that can identify individuals in massive crowds, track their movements across cities, predict their behavior based on patterns. Those are being developed for counterterrorism and battlefield intelligence, but they're already being sold to police departments, deployed in airports, integrated into corporate security systems. The same algorithms that identify enemy combatants in war zones are being repurposed to identify shoplifters, protesters, and people who haven't committed any crime but fit a predictive profile of someone who might. Predictive policing, where AI analyzes crime data and tells officers where to patrol and who to watch, is already operational in dozens of American cities. The systems are trained on historical arrest data, which means they inherit and amplify every bias present in that data. Communities that were over-policed in the past get flagged for more policing in the future. The AI doesn't see this as unfair. It sees it as pattern optimization. And because the system is allegedly objective, because it's math rather than human prejudice, it's harder to challenge and harder to reform. Autonomous weapons, the kind that can select and engage targets without human intervention, are banned by international treaties that almost no major military power has actually signed. The technology exists, the ethical framework to control it does not. And as these systems become cheaper and more accessible, they won't stay in the hands of governments. Terrorist organizations, criminal syndicates, even wealthy individuals will have access to weaponized AI. A drone that costs $3,000, equipped with facial recognition and autonomous flight, can be programmed to find and eliminate a specific person without any human being present to give the final order. That's not science fiction. That's commercially available technology right now, today, in early 2025. So where does this go? What does the world look like in 5 years and 10 years if these trends continue? Here's one trajectory. It's not even the worst case scenario. It's just the most likely one based on current incentives and behaviors. By 2030, every major military has fully integrated AI into command and control systems. Human operators are still technically in the loop, but they're functioning more as supervisors than decision makers, approving recommendations generated by algorithms they don't fully understand, operating under time pressure that makes meaningful review impossible. The decision loop from threat detection to kinetic response is measured in single-digit seconds for most scenarios. Autonomous systems manage air defense, cyber warfare, and drone operations with minimal human input. In this world, conflicts don't escalate the way they used to. There's no time for diplomacy between the first shot and full-scale war because the systems are optimized to respond, not negotiate. A border skirmish that previous generations would have contained through back channels and negotiations now spirals into wider conflict before any human decision-maker even understands what's happening. Wars don't start because leaders choose them. They start because algorithms misinterpret data, or correctly interpret data that humans would have read differently. Civilian surveillance is ubiquitous. Every public space, every digital interaction, every financial transaction is monitored by AI systems originally developed for military intelligence. Privacy isn't outlawed. It just becomes technically impossible. The same capabilities that track enemy soldiers across continents track ordinary citizens across cities. Dissent becomes predictable. Protest movements are identified and disrupted before they fully form. Not through dramatic crackdowns, just through quiet, algorithmic suppression. Your social media reach gets throttled. Your job applications get mysteriously rejected. Your credit score drops for reasons you'll never fully understand. The system doesn't need to arrest you. It just needs to make resistance exhausting and invisibly costly. And the economic concentration accelerates. The companies that control military AI, OpenAI, Google DeepMind, Palantir, Anduril, and whatever Chinese equivalents we don't hear about, become more powerful than most governments. They're not just contractors. They're infrastructure. Countries depend on them the way cities depend on electrical grids. And that dependency gives them political influence that makes 20th century defense contractors look quaint by comparison. Here's what I want you to sit with. We are living through a transition that future historians, if there are future historians, will mark as one of the most significant inflection points in human civilization. Not because AI is inherently evil or because technology is bad, but because we are fundamentally changing who makes life and death decisions, and we're doing it at a speed that outpaces our ability to understand the consequences. ChatGPT joining the military isn't a headline. It's not a product launch. It's a symptom of something much larger, the automation of power itself, the removal of human judgment from systems that determine which cities survive and which ones burn, which governments stand and which ones fall, who lives and who dies. And we're doing it not because we sat down and decided this was a good idea, but because the incentive structures of global competition make it nearly impossible to choose any other path. Every military that doesn't integrate AI falls behind. Every country that hesitates loses strategic advantage. Every leader who insists on keeping humans in the loop is gambling with national survival. So they all move forward, together, locked in a coordination problem where the rational individual choice produces a collectively insane outcome. And maybe we'll develop the wisdom to control this. Maybe we'll create robust international frameworks, meaningful oversight, genuine safeguards that prevent the worst outcomes. Maybe AI will make war so destructive that it becomes unthinkable. A true deterrent that ushers in an era of peace. Maybe. But right now, in February 2025, the trajectory is clear. We're not slowing down. We're accelerating. And the distance between where we are and where this could go is being measured in months, not decades. That contract the Department of Defense signed in January, that wasn't the beginning. We're already several chapters into this story. The question is whether we'll recognize what's happening before we reach the ending, and whether, when we do, there'll be anyone left with the authority to rewrite it.